I mentioned that I went to my father's 75th birthday party. And so, you sit there, you make the rounds, you have fantastic food and cake and all that stuff, and you meet friends of that you don't know, that you didn't, my father's friends. And one of them, a musician for his church, he said, "Oh, you're a pilot. Well, let me ask you, I've been curious. Every time I get on a flight, there's all these little like antennas all over the airplane. I was wondering what those are." And I went, well, are they antennas, or what do they look like? And he goes, they're long, and they're usually all over the wing and all over the body of the aircraft. And I'm thinking maybe vortex generators. So I started asking him some questions. Do they look like little tiny fences that are a couple inches? And he's like, no, no, like really long, and they're like on the tail and they're on the wing tips. And I'm like, oh, it sounds like you're talking about static dischargers. Now, a couple weeks ago, I posted on the social media sites for Squawk Ident some fantastic stills and video of St. Elmo's fire.
Yeah.
Capture flying out of Dallas a couple weeks ago.
That's awesome.
And so I was like, oh, what a coincidence that you're asking me about static dischargers. He's like, yeah, what do they do?
Good question.
That's a great question. Let's talk about that on the next podcast. So, Rob, you know quite a bit about static discharge wicks, being a crew chief in the Air Force.
Yeah, I know that the airplane needs them. When they're missing, we have to replace them.
Yeah, they're not a no-go item most of the time. They're a DL item. Deviation list, so you can write it down that it's missing and go for I don't know how many cycles. But so static dischargers, commonly known as static wicks or static discharge wicks, are installed on the trailing edges of aircraft, included the electrically grounded ailerons, elevators, rudders, wings, horizontal and vertical stabilizer tips. Fitted on almost all civilian aircraft today, they are high electrical resistance, from 6 to 200 mega ohms for those technical listeners out there. Devices with a lower corona voltage than the surrounding aircraft structure. Okay, now we're talking like Latin here for me. They control the corona discharge of the atmosphere. They are used on aircraft to allow the continuous, satisfactory operation of onboard navigation and radio communication systems during precipitation static conditions. Precipitation static is an electrical charge on an airplane caused by flying through rain, snow, ice, or dust particles. When the aircraft charge is great enough, it discharges into the surrounding air. Without static dischargers, the charge would discharge in large batches through pointed aircraft extremities, such as antenna, wingtips, vertical and horizontal stabilizer, and other protrusions. The discharge creates a broadband radio noise frequency from DC to 1000 megahertz, which can affect aircraft communication. Static dischargers contain sharp points that any other part of the aircraft cause the charge to discharge through them instead, and do so gradually.
Yep. So basically, it's just a very fancy way to say that it provides a safe path for static electricity to exit the aircraft back into the atmosphere.
Right. So how does static electricity form on an aircraft? So we've talked a little bit about it here in this explanation from Wikipedia. I'll put a link in the show notes. But so you're traveling through the air, and all these dust particles, usually it's ice crystals, especially at elevation, close to thunderstorms, or even rain, and you have it. We always hear it on the radio. We hear that whiny sound on the radio. It's static that is not squelched out because of how much resistance and ohms, and there's just a lot of feedback there. And you hear it on the radio, and it's very annoying. And
what's that again? Oh, okay, yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, recording of it next time it happens. So these dischargers give the electricity or the electrical charge an avenue to escape without building up. Now, when the discharge cannot keep up with the actual static being introduced to the aircraft, we see the static electricity escape the aircraft, especially in the flight deck, right through the windshield,
Yep.
because it's a metal, obviously a metal aircraft, and as it's coming up, it hits the windshield. There's no metal. It's whatever it is, plexi.
It's probably Lexan or something like that.
Plastic.
Plastic glass. Yeah.
So this electricity just sparks, and I'll actually upload a photo on the website of
Yeah.
St. Elmo's fire, because it was pretty cool to witness.
Yeah. But that's your airplane getting charged up with static electricity right there.
And sometimes it gets so bad you can actually smell the sulfur.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Burning
It's pretty.
ozone.
Yep. And then working behind the scenes are your static wicks on your wingtips and tail and all the trailing edge devices. Those static wicks are discharging that built up static electricity back into the atmosphere. It's kind of like when you walk across the your room, and drag, you're wearing socks, and you drag your feet across it, and you go touch the doorknob or something, and you get a little thunderbolt come out of your finger. The airplane's kind of doing the same thing, except it's not wearing socks. It's just flying through the air, and it's building up its static electricity. And you see static electricity in the sky all the time when you have a thunderstorm. A lightning bolt is a discharge of static electricity that has been built up in a cloud. Everything has some kind of an electrical charge to it statically, positive or negative, and yeah, there you go. Plane, the cloud builds it up, and then at some point it says, I got to get rid of this thing. Where's the nearest negative waypoint here for me to get rid of this, and that's where you get a lightning bolt, and to the point of the very pointed portions of the static wick. You need that very pointy edge, because it's very similar to like a lightning bolt hitting like a TV antenna or a tree. It looks for the highest and the pointiest part to discharge it at. And of course, if it can't find it, it's just going to do it into flat ground. But if it has something tall and prominent, then that's what it's going to hit. And that's basically how the static discharger kind of takes that place on an airplane.
Yep.
Instead of the antennas, instead of the radio navigate antennas and all that stuff, because we need those to operate. So we use these static wicks, and occasionally they do get burnt off or blown off, and then that's when we have to have them replaced, because they did their job and they served their useful life, and they end up getting replaced. And I remember the ones that we used to use on the F-111 and F-16s, they were just screw-ons. So you just go grab a few from the maintenance supply shop there, and unscrew the old one and screw back in the new one, and plane's good to go.
Yeah, all refreshed, renewed.
Yep.
And aircraft get struck by lightning. It happens
Yep.
all the time. We do our very best to avoid it, obviously, as aviators, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Now,
Yep.
what happens? Now, you're not touching the ground. You're in the air. So the lightning, or the electrical charge, passes through the aircraft.
Right.
I've heard of stories of these balls of electrical orbs going through from the front of the airplane to the back of the airplane as it's getting struck by lightning, and it just lights up the cabin at night. No one gets shocked because they're not grounded, so the electricity just kind of passes through the cabin usually.
Yep.
Very rare that we actually see the physical effects inside the aircraft, but on the outside of the aircraft, if you have suspected that you were struck by lightning, you're supposed to do a walk around, log it in the maintenance log in the AML, and what maintenance comes out and does is an inspection of the aircraft. And what they're looking for are all the antennas and the static discharge wicks, and they're looking for frayed tips, trailing edge tips. And you can kind of tell almost right away, usually from the number 2 radio antenna, which is at the bottom of the fuselage, that you've been struck, because you'll see burn marks. And And Rob just sent me some photos of. Is this the?
That was a lightning strike I had as we were arriving into Puebla, Mexico. I forget how many years ago, at least 10 years ago, maybe even more. But yeah, we were descending about, looked like it was about 30 miles away from a major thunderstorm. And as we were descending through the light overcast layer of clouds, and it was actually almost so light that you could see through from above. You could see through this layer down to the. You could see the ground through the layer. That's how light the layer was. And as we descended through that layer, I heard and saw a flash and a pop. And I was like, man, I think we just got struck by lightning. And I looked at my first officer, my co-pilot, and was like, did you see that? And he's like, no, I honestly didn't hear or see anything. And I'm like, oh, maybe it was just me. Could have been. It happened so fast. And I didn't hear like a lightning strike or, no thunder. There was nothing. I mean, the storm was far away. I mean, we're 30 miles away from it.
Yeah.
This was probably 15,000 feet or so as we were descending into Puebla. So, it was really odd to even experience a lightning strike at that altitude, or that, that from that distance from a thunderstorm. So anyway, I called the flight attendant. I said, hey, did you hear or see anything back there? And she's like, no, why? I was like, oh, nothing. We're good. Your passengers all happy, basically trying to get the sense of, if there's anybody looking out at the wing or anything like that. It's like, no, they all look like they're kind of sleepy or, ready to get there. I'm like, okay, cool. So we landed, and first clue was when the first officer tried to communicate with the local station on radio number 2. Hey, we're on the ground. You got no response. So like, oh, okay, no big deal. That happens sometimes at these outstations. They're out on the ramp and they're not working the radios. So we pull in, and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'm going to do the walk around while you shut down the airplane, since I think we got struck by lightning, but I'm not sure what it was. So as I did the walk around, that's when I saw those pictures, and you might want to post them on the website or whatever. Those are pretty damn good ones. Yeah. But basically, it looks like that's where it entered. That's where the lightning struck, was that wingtip. Right, burned the structure right down to the honeycomb on the wingtip, and you could see the static wicks are all blown off. But also, I think another exit point was our number 2 comm radio antenna, which actually blew out our number 2 comm radio, which we didn't realize. We didn't put all the pieces together until we departed back to Dallas. They just basically put some speed tape over the wing first of all, called it good. And then we departed for Dallas. And then, when we were trying to transmit an in-range call on our number 2 comm with DFW, because we needed a couple extra wheelchairs, we couldn't read anybody. And then so I asked ATC if we could try test the radio with their help. So we tested our number 2 radio, and they couldn't hear anything. So that's when we reported that. And of course, number 2 radio was fried. So there we are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing those pictures. I'll put them up on the website.
Yeah.